All right, so DJ definitely can't get enough. Dying to know more. I
Yeah,
swear that
tell me about like your two books. What inspired you to write those two books?
yeah. So first of all, behind me over here, this is actually a copy of Bitcoin Magazine, which is published by BitcoinMagazine.com. So I am a contributor to Bitcoin Magazine, just like Jeremy Garcia for Satoshi's Journal, and I've submitted my articles to them. But yeah, that's what few people know is Bitcoin Magazine actually publishes its own physical magazine to go along with the website. So I'm happy to have Bitcoin Magazine up, and of course, as a contributor, I have my promo code BitcoinDog, one word, all caps, for 10% off the Bitcoin conference in Miami in May next year. This is actually my book right here. It's called The Bitcoin Dog: Following Descent to the Bitcoin C++ Source Code. Very, very exciting. Available on Amazon, paperback, $9.99, ebook, $2.99, and Kindle Unlimited. And then in particular, shout out to Anthony Feliciano. He's helped me on my website to make a way for me to sell my book with Bitcoin. So he helped me stand up or it's his, but it's a Bitcoin pay server to pay over Lightning Network Bitcoin. And you go on the website, I'll put it in the show notes, and you click to buy Bitcoin Dog with Bitcoin, and it takes you to a BTC Pay server, and there's a Lightning invoice, and you pay that with your Lightning wallet, and then you'll get a download to download the EPUB file for the book. In particular, let's see here. This is probably my favorite little picture. This is my about the author page with me and my dog. Her name is Sheila. So if I'm going to self-publish a book, I might as well put pictures of me with my dog in the book. But my journey down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, I spent so much time reading about Bitcoin. I felt like I had read almost everything there was to read. Not as much as Guy Swan, of course, for his Bitcoin Audible. He is the guy who's read more about Bitcoin than anyone I know. But there was all this talk and emphasis about Bitcoin being open source, about the code being readily available to anyone who wants to read it. And for me, I earned my bachelor's degree in computer science from UCLA, and I said, hey, show me the GitHub. Let me review the Bitcoin Core C++ source code. I'll just read the code directly. I'm out of things to read. I'll read it. And in particular, I was very fascinated to know how does the source code implement the 21 million Bitcoin supply cap? Is there actually a variable in the code that says, Bitcoin's max supply is 21 million? And that's not the case. And what's fun about self-publishing my book, almost all books are in black and white, but because it's cheaper to produce. But for me, I'm like, I want the book in color. I want to show the C++ code in color. So here's the place in the code. Let's see if you can see here. Is it blurry? Can you see it okay?
Yeah, I can see it. It's fine.
So here's the place in the code where you'll see the coin starts as 50. Coin in this case is a macro that means 100 million. So the base unit of Bitcoin really is Satoshis. It's not actually one Bitcoin. And the way it works is every halving, every now that's pretty embarrassing if I'm blanking on the number. It's 210,000 blocks, which takes roughly 4 years. The way the halving is actually implemented is rather than divide the supply in half, we actually bit shift this value one element to the right, which makes a zero drop off, and it keeps halving because it's binary numbers. So just looking at my table here, you can see that the first binary number is ultimately 50 Bitcoin. and it keeps getting bit shift to the right one element um, with each 210,000 blocks to implement the halving. And that's what makes it so there'll be 33 epochs or 33 halvings. So I just thought that was so cool and so interesting. And ultimately, the big issue I had though is I tried to show my friends the C++ source code, and they were totally lost on me. I mean, that's the thing is these were friends who had bought Bitcoin, and it turned out to be way too premature to show them the C++ source code because they barely even knew that Bitcoin even went through halvings in the first place, or if they did know it went through halvings, they didn't necessarily know what it meant. Just that every 4 years the supply was cut in half, but they didn't know how that was actually done or implemented. So the big thing to know when it comes to reviewing C++ code is you need to actually understand the algorithm of how it works um, before you read the code and before you read the code and then see how it's implemented. So that was where I was like, okay, I need to back up. I can't just go straight to showing my friends the elegance of this C++ source code. Instead, I need to explain it through some story. And for me, I happen to be living in the outback of Australia, in Alice Springs, Australia, where I had my Australian cattle dog, Sheila. And I was inspired to write a fun fictional story using like a I don't think metaphor is the right word, but I was thinking of The Princess Bride, where the grandpa reads to the kid like a story. So it's the same thing, but it's my dog Sheila telling a story. She's a grandma now, my dog. She's telling the story to her grand puppies um, about when she discovered the Bitcoin blockchain and how it worked. And so she's running around the desert in the outback of Australia, trying to see how Bitcoin works, but implemented through animals, and this big analogy through animals to say how Bitcoin works. And it's definitely a stretch and takes some hand waving, but after learning how these animals in the desert of Australia implement the Bitcoin blockchain, then that's the cool part. I take you to the real C++ source code and then see how it's actually implemented in the code. And then by then, for the reader, now that they understand how it works through this analogy with talking animals in the Australian outback, then they can actually read the C++ source code and appreciate the code.
Dude, that's amazing. I really love that. I really appreciate that you wrote that book because I think there aren't enough books that actually take a fun approach like that and actually tell it through a story. And that's so unique, like especially to explain like how the Bitcoin algorithm actually works and how the code actually works. So, man, that's amazing. I have to be honest, I haven't read your book yet. So now you just really motivated me to definitely take a read. So I appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, definitely. It's just super fun. I found out how easy it is to self-publish a book on Amazon, and ultimately it enhanced my own learning. Um, I could read you page one out loud right now. Chapter one is only one page long, and it's my favorite page. It might take 2 to 3 minutes for me to get through the whole page, though, if we have that time.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so the Bitcoin dog, following descent to the Bitcoin C++ source code, chapter one, to grandmother's house we go. Mommy, 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 are we there yet? Sebastiana cried. Not yet, Mom replied. What are we going to do when we get to Grandma Sheila's house? Her brother Hunter asked. You'll see when we get there, Mom said. Sebastiana loved the feeling of the red dirt on her paws in the Australian outback. She and her brother Hunter got to go to Grandma Sheila's house in Alice Springs every day in the winter while their mom helped with a Royal Flying Doctor's service. Hunter was sad when there weren't any flies in the winter time. They were his favorite. Grandma Sheila was lying on her doggy hammock, basking in the outback sun, when her daughter and grandpuppies ran up. One ear perked up, then the other, and just as she opened her eyes, her granddaughter Sebastiana pounced on her to start licking her face. the doggy hammock nearly toppled over as the Australian cattle dogs all did a dog pile while greeting each other with glee. Careful, careful, Mom shouted. Be nice to Grandma Sheila. Oh, it's okay, dear, Sheila said. I'm always happy to see my grand puppies. We missed you so much, Grandma Sheila, Sebastiana and Hunter said in unison. I missed you both, too. Thanks again for watching them, Mom. Remember to have them in bed by 8 o'clock. And try not to keep them up with stories about Bitcoin again. Bitcoin! Bitcoin! The grandpuppies screamed. Okay, okay, I'll do my best. But no promises, Sheila said. Bye, Mom, Hunter and Sebastiana said. And with that, Mom was on her way, tail wagging, but wary about her mother teaching her puppies about Bitcoin at such a young age. She wanted them to know the implementation details of how it worked, but when they were older, when they were ready. She didn't want to confuse them with too much too fast. Ultimately, she'd have to trust Grandma Sheila. After all, she had been there when the great idea of Bitcoin was just getting started. Okay, grandpuppies, let's head on inside. Have I got a story to tell you?
That's amazing, man. That's really great. I'm looking forward to it. That's just chapter one, and that sounds amazing. You definitely got me into it. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a perfect like beginning too. Like even just to like read to kids, I think that's a really good approach, and I think there's actually a big need for more kids books in the Bitcoin space. So
Yeah.
um,
The fun
yeah,
of the idea of kids books, which I'm sure you'll appreciate, you say it's for kids, but then when the adults read it to the kids, you're actually orange pilling the adults, or that's the idea. You're that they're ultimately the audience that ends up learning. And yeah, I definitely want to say, the book's only 40 pages, so don't no misconceptions about the length or anything. But yeah, in particular, what's cool is um, I'm sure you know this, but like, have you heard about the secret message Satoshi Nakamoto put in the Genesis block?
yeah, Chancellor on the brink of second bailout.
That's right. So the cool thing that I do is this is the place in the code where you can see where Satoshi Nakamoto puts that in the Bitcoin core source code in the blockchain. See, that's the big thing is that um, when you sync your full node, you're building your copy of the Bitcoin blockchain block by block from other peers, but the one thing you can't trust is what's the first block. So the first block, the Genesis block, needs to be hard coded in Bitcoin Core. So you know what's the very first block, and then you download all the other blocks which point to the first block. So in the code, you can actually see where that phrase is defined. And then additionally, and this is of course available online, but I've also as well put it here in my book so that people can actually see the raw bytes of the Genesis block if they've never seen it before. And I've also included an ASCII hex table so you can verify the column at the end that, wow, these bytes really do translate to that message. So it really was just such a fun project for me, to hear all these things about Bitcoin and actually dive into the source code for myself. All credit, of course, to Andreas Antonopoulos and Jimmy Song for writing, mastering Bitcoin and programming Bitcoin to help me learn, how Bitcoin is actually implemented. But I felt like the resources to learn about the code of Bitcoin were pretty all or nothing. Either it's literally something for a developer or nothing at all. So this is for those for people who already own Bitcoin and already understand Bitcoin decently, to have fun geeking out, some geek entertainment to learn the lower level implementation details.
Absolutely, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that with me, and I'm really looking forward to now reading it. So is it more kind of in story form, or is it more for like programmers and people that want to understand the more in-depth C++ code?
Yeah, so ultimately the book is This is fantastic. For all the times I've been on Twitter, Twitter Spaces, this is like the longest I've ever had a chance to talk about my book. I'll say Anders, he's asked me about my book before on Twitter Space, but here's the table of contents right here. So the ultimately the code has 3 cents, and the 3 cents are where the story time is over, and it's actually talking about explaining the C++ source code. So that's a nice
Nice.
way of saying a little bit of both. So the first 11 pages are all a story leading up to how the difficulty adjustment is actually done. And then I explain the difficulty adjustment, the Genesis block, and how the 21 million Bitcoin limit is implemented. And then in particular, again, something I'm just so proud of is I have it actually in color, with the syntax highlighting the red and the blue, etc. So even though if you purchase the physical copy for $9.99, you at least get to read the code as it's meant to be read with the syntax highlighting and coloring. And I really am going line by line through the code, explaining just the little line excerpts, what each line does, so you get to learn as you go through. And yeah, so there, I will say most of my readers ultimately just kind of skip over the code sections, but it's pretty rewarding for the people who choose to actually read the code parts as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's awesome that like you actually have like your bachelor's in computer science. So like, you're coming at it from, a little bit of a higher level and understanding. So I appreciate you creating such a creative way to present such an interesting um, system that is Bitcoin. So thank you so much, man. Appreciate you
Yeah,
sharing that.
that was the interesting thing too, is how to your point also, I think you might have said you had a little bit of a computer science background. For me, I saw Bitcoin as simply this unproven software algorithm. I first heard about it while I was at UCLA in 2013, and I'm like, oh, I'm pretty skeptical of this software thing. I didn't appreciate it, Bitcoin, for the monetary revolution that it is. That it's a new money. Like, it's not just, oh, this is just some open source project or some code or some software algorithm. Like this, magic internet money, like, could actually be like a real digital asset for transacting. So,
Yeah,
similar to you.
exactly.
Mhm.
Which is exactly how what actually like brought me into Bitcoin, like I said, is the economics of it. That's actually what taught me economics. That's what's motivated me to learn more about what is money and how do macroeconomics work, and how does like global trade work, and why is it all so important, and why are we going through this globalization, and why is it so important that we stay globalized, and so that we don't actually shut our borders down and not cooperate with one another like globally, because if we did that, it would be a completely different world. So really, like, Bitcoin is just all encompassing in so many different areas, like from math to science to physics to chemistry, even to because once you get into like the Bitcoin mining and the servers and the nodes, and like it's all encompassing, really, like the philosophy, it's really amazing. And it's also really amazing at like how it helps people just become better people, through their journey into Bitcoin, like I really like can't stop thinking about Bitcoin. Like that's all I ever want to think about.
Really.
It's all I ever want to learn about, it's like, and it's not because of the money, it's because of like the all-encompassing aspects of it. And like for me, like I said, personally, what I really love about it is that like I really think it will be the solution to bring the whole world together in a better way. Like I know that like it won't like solve human problems like, arrogance and ignorance and anger and hatred and stuff, but I think a lot of that will be a little bit lessened, and it will be a better world with Bitcoin as its monetary system at the core of it, at the base layer of it. And it's also interesting, like I hadn't learned much about Lightning until recently, and like I said, I started learning about Bitcoin like because of March 2020, and it took me like 6+ months just to really start even entering the depths of the rabbit hole. And and still here it is now 2022, like what, more than 2 years now, and there's still so much more for me to learn, and then there's going to continue to be more to learn because literally every day there's more to learn. There's more content being put out, there's more educational
Yeah, I mean, I'm
resources, and it's
curious
just
to
amazing.
ask you. I mean, again, you can't beat yourself up too bad about um, what took you so long to adopt it. Like you and a lot of people in general have built up their own immune response to what's a scam and what's not a scam, and making sure that they're not attacked or made vulnerable or falling victim to a scam. And you're talking a little bit about Bitcoin maximalism, or even toxic Bitcoin maximalism, as a way, as a self-defense measure, immune response to other altcoins or things affecting Bitcoin. Um, and I think you and I were in a Twitter space where someone was bringing up something called stacks for Bitcoin. But of course, for both of us, we were suspicious because for stacks to be implemented, it needed its own native token to quote unquote get it started, which was perplexing because Lightning Network, of course, doesn't necessarily need its own separate token. The newest one I learned I wanted to ask you about is this not necessarily a layer two, but a side chain for Bitcoin called Liquid. Have you heard about this thing?
Yeah, I've heard of Liquid, and it sounds like, according to Samson Mao, which is the only person that I've actually started learning about Liquid from, based on some of his talks on Liquid. Um, and it even started from a Twitter space, and now I'm kind of going down the Liquid rabbit hole, but not deep enough. So, yeah, it's interesting. It sounds to me like from what I understand so far, it was created more for business to business transactions. And so what you do is you lock up your Bitcoin, and when you lock it up in the Liquid network, you then get something called LBTC, which is Liquid Bitcoin. So then what that does is, I guess it helps something to do with like how it helps like the fees or something, and like the transaction speeds. Because now it's like basically the way I kind of am seeing it right now is Liquid is kind of its own like Lightning channel, but just the Liquid Lightning channel, basically. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of how I'm seeing it from a outside 30,000 foot view. It is different than that because what they have is they have called like the foundation, I guess, or something like that, where they have, I think, like 15 or so, I guess. I don't want to say this wrong, but I guess 15 nodes, and or no, 15 like multi-sig is what I meant to say. And so it requires um like all those multi-sigs in order to, I guess, unlock it or something. I don't know. I'm still so new to it, so I can't explain it well enough clearly. So yeah, I still need to go down that rabbit hole, but it is a side chain, and um, you know, it seems to be legit, So I don't know. I haven't used it. I don't see why I would want to use it, but from what I've understood so far is that it was created, I guess, more for like corporations to use like business to business level rather than like peer to peer like me and you.
Yeah, man, talk about having fun up late getting into controversial topics within just the Bitcoin community. Really fast, I just want to say about Liquid. The way I understand it is how it affects the main Bitcoin protocol. The main net is a certain wallet address, or UTXO, on the Bitcoin blockchain is quote unquote locked, as if there's a way to say locked or unlocked. So that's fixed, and then that amount of Bitcoin is now pegged, quote unquote, to this Liquid sidechain, and then on the Liquid sidechain, whatever transactions they want to do over there, go for it. the point is, it's not until their liquid sidechain activities are done that then those Bitcoin UTXOs on the main blockchain are then, spent on another transaction. The thing that's interesting to me to ask you about, choose your own adventure if you want to be rewarded with controversial Bitcoin topics right now, is the newest thing I heard about. Peter Todd, a well-respected Bitcoin developer, someone I learned a lot of Bitcoin about, proposing changing the Bitcoin source code. I'm pretty sure it would be a hard fork and not a soft fork, to create a tail emission schedule. This concept that it's not actually going to work if we have this fixed supply. Sorry, this is too major for me to say in a short question. Have you heard of this? Of Peter Todd saying we might need a hard fork Bitcoin from a soft fork to do a tail emission schedule, such that rather there be only a fixed supply of Bitcoin, we kind of have this small dribble effect of Bitcoin all the time to always reward the miners, because ultimately there might not be enough on-chain activity 80 years from now for the miners to collect enough incentive from the transaction fees. So we need to supplement them a little bit. And ultimately, it's okay because the 21 million Bitcoin limit will still be an effective 21 million Bitcoin limit when you account for all the ancient Bitcoin that's been lost to time, when you account for the 5 million Bitcoin that's never been moved and probably never will move, and or lost Bitcoin. So effectively the cap is 21 million, but we need some sort of long tail emission to keep funding miners 80 years from now. Have you heard of this or no?
I haven't heard of Peter Todd, so that makes me want to go look him up right after this and see that, because it sounds like you learned a lot from Peter Todd. Is he like a computer scientist or a developer? What's his deal?
He's a developer on Bitcoin Core. So have you ever heard of Peter Wiley? He's another person I learned a lot from
Oh, okay.
his
I
developments.
heard recently something about how like one of the Bitcoin Core developers stepped down. Is that Peter Todd?
No, it's Peter Wiley, who is no longer a Bitcoin Core maintainer. So Peter Wiley can still he's still a contributor or developer for Bitcoin Core, but Bitcoin Core is on GitHub, and while it's an open source project, there's only five maintainers, and those five maintainers are the only ones who have the power to commit changes to Bitcoin Core. And when I first heard about this, I was really concerned, like, oh, is this a huge centralization risk of centralizing power of who gets to commit code changes to Bitcoin Core? Gloria Zhao is the newest fifth person to have the keys to commit changes to Bitcoin Core on GitHub. But the two things that assuaged me was, first, that really it's not meant to be a glamorous job to be a Bitcoin Core maintainer. Your goal is to be more janitorial. This is not necessarily supposed to be a place where you put your thumb on the scale to say what gets committed and what doesn't. It should be the case that it's strictly a housekeeping administrative thing of what you allow to commit or not commit. But still, it makes me nervous. The other thing is learning from Jeremy Rubin and the whole BIF 119 fiasco, is Jeremy really also hammering the point that Bitcoin is not Bitcoin Core. It's not as if the Bitcoin Core is simply a reference implementation. Ultimately, anyone can write code for Bitcoin. It just has to follow the same rules or rule sets for what's considered valid or invalid. And then again, this is also how like Bitcoin can change, but it's just about the consensus of which nodes are running which rules.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know much about that side of it. Um, I really recommend you talk to Portland Hoddle about all
Oh,
this.
I'm talking to him all the time. I
Yeah.
talk to him in like every Twitter space. He's
Yeah, yeah,
great.
yeah, yeah. And
He's
speaking
great.
of which, he's actually going to be hosting a Twitter space in a few minutes.
12 block
And
space.
Yeah, yeah. So a 12 block space for he's now been hosting Bitcoin tech support spaces once a week, Wednesdays at I think 7 Pacific Standard Time, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Wednesday. And I try to support him and go to those spaces and help him co-host. And he's doing a great job, and he really gets some really great, knowledgeable Bitcoiners in there, who actually are developers. And like, for example, D++ hangs out in there and helps people answer questions. Like even Nesky and I've seen so many great developers popping in there, and just great knowledgeable Bitcoiners in general who can help people like set up their own full core node and their Lightning node, and help them with self custody and multi-sig, and all the like tech support questions that would generally come up. There's even been a few very interesting ones about basically this conversation that we're having right now, where unfortunately I don't feel comfortable enough sharing enough, because I never really delved deep into that side of it, because I didn't delve deep into the code of it. That's why I'm really curious to read your book and learn more. And I'm also looking forward to delving deeper into that side of it, because I really do regret not getting my degree in computer science. Because actually, when I went to university, I actually had a really bad teacher. And because I had a bad teacher, the professor, he was there for like 30 plus years teaching, you know, computer science 101 out of a textbook. I think we started out learning Java. And I was just not really into that. Like, I thought it would be more hands-on, and I was really looking forward to like kind of coding and learning how to code. And I just wasn't, I guess, vibing with the professor. And I basically dropped out of that course and never went back to computer science because of that bad experience. And that actually like also really gave me a really bad taste for kind of like the fiat education system, because I didn't really like the way the system works, especially because, for example, I was blessed enough and great, and I'm grateful for it. I was blessed enough to get a scholarship to go to university.
I
But the
see. So
thing
you dropped
is,
out of computer science, but not necessarily out of university.
well, no, actually, I did end up dropping out of
Okay.
university in the end, because so this is how the story goes. Is My first day I got called in to the financial office, and even though I was on a scholarship, they were like, all right, so how are you going to handle this bill for housing and food? And I was like, wait, what do you mean? I thought I'm here on a scholarship. Like, I thought everything was taken care of. And apparently it wasn't. And so I had to sign on the dotted line in order to stay in school and make that decision, and go into debt in order to take out a loan to continue studying for my first year there. And I really didn't like that experience, because it was like basically like just proof that they just push kids. Well, I guess I wasn't a kid then, right? But you know, still, like, they push people into debt without really explaining to them what it is, what it really even means that you're going to go into debt now. And then, like, I get that you have to invest in yourself and all that, but still, like, it just gave me a really bad taste, and it really is like unfortunate. But after my first year there, I ended up just dropping out because I didn't want to continue to. I basically had to, like, work a job while going to school, and I was just like, you know what, like, at that time I also had like my father, he wasn't feeling well, and had to help him with his health, so it just made more sense to move back home. And I did end up going into another university closer to home while taking care of my father, but that only worked out for a semester, and then I ended up dropping out of there as well. So I ended up just deciding to, like, anything I want to learn, I'm just going to learn myself. And, you know, information was getting easier and easier. And now with today, you can learn anything you want for free, So I just started working. And that was kind of proof for me that, like, that was just another example of how like the system is so broken. Like you can't make people make uneducated decisions, in my opinion. It's not freedom if it's a forced decision. So I find that a lot of the decisions that we make today are not educated decisions, they're forced decisions. And because of that, it really puts people in a bad position. And oftentimes we don't even think of these decisions because they're, we think of them as haphazardly, like, left or right, but we don't actually think about the repercussions down the road. So like it's interesting, but definitely my point of this was that I definitely want to go back to computer science because I've always been very interested in it. And I think in the future, in like the next few decades, more and more of us will have to be more tech savvy because technology is growing and increasing exponentially. And we're going to just naturally want to. And I think really most people do want to be more tech savvy because being more tech savvy is just being smarter. It's just knowing something more, So the more you know anything, the smarter you are, whether it's agriculturally or whether it's computer science related or whether it's physics or chemistry or anything. Really, like, I really do believe that, like, anybody that puts their mind to anything can really learn it if they want to, and more so if they really need to. So like I really do have hope that Bitcoin adoption will take off because of that. Like I know there's a lot of hurdles right now, and I know there's a learning curve. In the beginning, it definitely takes more than 10 hours, and then more than 100 hours, and then after 100 hours, you want to do 1,000 hours. And the thing is, we tell people a lot like, hey, do 100 hours, but you know, we only tell them that, not also mentioning that you're not going to feel like it's 100 hours. You're just going to be reading and learning and absorbing and happy to do it because you're going to be setting yourself free. And like literally, it's like the perfect example of how do you educate somebody? You educate them by motivating them to want to learn. Because if you motivate them to want to learn and if you show them that like it's going to help them in their life and how it's going to help them in their life to learn, they're going to want to do it. They're not even going to need a teacher. They're just going to come to the teacher for questions and for advice and guidance, but not necessarily even for the information. So I really do have high hopes that humanity is going to keep evolving for the better, and we're going to keep getting smarter because historically we have been. I mean, if you look throughout history, all the inventions have always historically just continued to grow better and better as people evolve to be smarter and smarter. And that's why also technology is growing exponentially. So it's really interesting. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of my rant on it. I honestly don't even remember where I started and where I was going with this, but I think it was more on the point of how I do want to get back into computer science and learning code, and I think Bitcoin is definitely going to help me with that because to set up your own full core node and to set up your Lightning node, you're going to be running command lines. You're going to be kind of setting up your own little server, and I think it's also extremely important to learn these things, especially today for privacy and security, because a lot of us really we use technology frivolously and the same way we often drive frivolously, in the sense that you don't think that you need to change a tire until you get a flat tire, and then you're like, oh crap, I should have learned how to change a tire. Or you don't learn that it's not that hard to just change your car oil. You should probably learn how to do that, maybe, at least know kind of the basics or something if you want to, whatever. But it doesn't hurt to know something. Knowledge is power, education is power, and information is power. And so and that is value. And I even heard a really great interview. I forget his name. I think it was Brian Tracy. I might be getting his name wrong, with Robert Breedlove. And he mentioned something very interesting, that when the internet was originally being invented and created, it was meant to have a layer, a way for value to be transferred. It was part of the intention of the creators of the internet. It wasn't just information to be transferred, but it was also value to be transferred. And so they couldn't quite figure that out. And then Netscape tried to figure it out. They released the internet, and then Netscape worked on that project, and they couldn't figure it out. And then PayPal was born. And actually, that's when Elon Musk joined PayPal. And then that's when they also couldn't figure out the Byzantine general problem and the double spend problem, and how to make it so that value could be easily transferred over the internet. So they just ended up using the US dollar, and they just digitized the US dollar. And so that's when Satoshi's Nakamoto invention really makes this new invention so important, because Satoshi Nakamoto solved the double spend problem, the Byzantine general problem. So it's really interesting, and I think, like I said, this is going to motivate a lot more people to be more tech savvy and just to grow in general and be smarter.
It's so funny. It's like there is no Byzantine general problem if you do centralized money powered by fiat,
Right. Well, I guess. I
right?
guess if you're okay with central planning and okay with them changing the rules all the time. And that's another point too about like Bitcoin maximalism and proof of stake systems. Like this is why proof of work is so important versus proof of stake. And that's a whole nother rabbit hole that I didn't quite learn immediately right away either. Like when you get into Bitcoin, you kind of start at it from the monetary side of things, and but depending, because I feel like I'm curious to know your point, but I feel like maybe you even came at it more from the computer science standpoint. I think you mentioned that you were looking at it more from the tech rather than from the monetary.
Yeah, once it was time for me to take more than a cursory look, I was looking at everything, right? So that's the thing is um Bitcoin, I think, just gives so many red flags. It gives so many reasons to just stay away, not do it, not dive in. So that's my one saving grace is, and just to be clear, I don't think you're alone. From Bitcoiners I've talked to, quite a few of them did start with buying not only Bitcoin but a bunch of altcoins. For me, though, it's been Bitcoin and Bitcoin only from the start. But I think that's just because of my nature and how late I've been to get started. So I really had to learn all about Bitcoin. Then I learned about all the other cryptocurrencies, and but then they were confusing me and how they stay decentralized enough. And then that all led me back to Bitcoin. So luckily, by the end, by the time it was time for me to place my first investment in a cryptocurrency, I knew I was going to do Bitcoin and Bitcoin only. Um, the biggest thing that I think is the most powerful to understand is DJ, you and I, we can make a DJ coin tomorrow. We can say, we can just copy all of Bitcoin's code and say, hey, I want to make it so that the difficulty adjust adjustment period is shorter. So instead of it taking on average 10 minutes, it happens in only 1 minute. So we're pumping out new Bitcoin blocks every 1 minute. And through my book, you'll see where is that calculation done to determine if it's taking too long or too short to make blocks. And so that was just what really gave me high conviction and high confidence, is seeing exactly where in the code that that variable is done or calculated for how much time in blocks, and then coupling that with learning about networks and network effects to say Bitcoin is not just its code. Just because you and I make our own DJ coin, it doesn't mean it has any value. It doesn't mean anyone cares about it or uses it or wants to start up nodes, passing along DJ coin transactions or anything. So it's just both. It's really understanding it from a code level. How does it actually work? What makes it really secure? And then also, even if someone does copy it, does that actually lower Bitcoin's value?
Yeah, exactly. And I actually just posted a tweet just last night, where I was watching Ione Appleberg on YouTube, and they have a lot of really great videos with Guy Swan and with Newt Svenholm. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing his name, but they're great. And the video was about poop coins and why they're so different. And they do a really good job of like packing in so much valuable, clear, concise information in really short videos, like 10-minute long, 5-minute long, short, concise, but like really well like spoken eloquently, like videos, and they do it with like doodles, and it's really cool. And I highly recommend everybody go check those out, especially if you're just getting into Bitcoin and trying to understand like Bitcoin versus crypto and why it's not crypto. And like it is, like Bitcoin is the first cryptocurrency, yes. So Bitcoin is a cryptocurrency, but why all these other cryptocurrencies are not Bitcoin, and why they're not money, and why there will be only one money. And so like it's really important to distinguish that. And I really wish that I did have more better mentors in the beginning that would have saved me so much time. So I really do appreciate the Bitcoin maximalists and the I I don't like using the word toxic because it has a negative connotation to
Yes,
it,
it does.
and I really prefer the word integrity because of that. So like Bitcoiners that have integrity, and I really that's what I think most people appreciate about Bitcoiners is they mostly all have integrity, good integrity. They're mostly very respectful people, mostly very peace loving people, and loving people, and people that just want to live freely. And when you want to live freely and you want to grow, you want to also help other people live freely and help them grow, I think, because it's that mutual understanding, and it's that it really does help everyone grow together, because you understand that if your neighbors aren't doing well and if your community is not doing well, then it's in your benefit to want to help your neighbors and want to help your community to do well so that you can live more freely in that community. So I think it's a win-win for everyone. And I think their videos are really good, short, concise videos, so I highly recommend people check them out. And I really try my best to be careful what I tweet, so that I can tweet more educational type content, for that reason, so that people can I try not to like spam Twitter. I really I think it helps that I didn't like social media in the beginning. I don't really like tweeting. I don't really like posting. I'm not really into that. I really want to just like focus on my life and helping others. But I think to help others, especially on the internet, like to reach more people, and to kind of scale that education, it helps to be on the internet, and then you do kind of have to tweet a lot, and you do kind of have to market yourself and do
Yeah, I
all
mean,
that.
Phil
But
does plenty of tweeting for you, I think, for sure. So
oh, what's up?
I think Phil does enough tweeting for a lifetime for
Oh
Satoshi's
yeah,
journal.
yeah. Are you talking about Need Creations?
That's right,
Yeah.
Need Creations. That's right.
Yeah. No, Phil's great, and he's actually got a really great Discord server full of just Bitcoin education. Like I think he said it's like over 25,000 hours worth of resources, all free. So I'm really happy that I met him through Satoshi's journal, and really like everyone that we've gone into Satoshi's journal on the team, like that's working on it. They're all really great people, and but again, it's because they're Bitcoiners, right? Like even you, like you're just a stranger that I just met online, but I can just have this conversation with you for hours. Whereas like some of my friends, like they would just be wanting to talk about like the bread and circus that's happening in the world, like just kind of like the sports and the movies and the Hollywood and the distractions that are out there. And yeah, sometimes it's nice just to forget about like the more important topics and the deep philosophy of life and all that good stuff. But at the end of the day, like you also want to be able to have these deep, meaningful, important conversations where we're all trying to grow and we're all trying to better the world for our future generations.
I think I figured it out what it is about why we're able to talk about this for hours. I just thought of it staring at that beautiful Bitcoin is Freedom logo. And I think it's part of what you were saying earlier, where for you and I and many others, hopefully most people, there's a natural desire to pursue freedom, to want to pursue freedom and want to care about freedom. How can you not be excited about freedom or what it means to be free as a big concept? But while I was not someone who talked about freedom for hours on end, it was because it was like more of an abstract concept. It was not clear or obvious to me, like how could I feel empowered to pursue freedom if only there was like such a tool that I could use to reach that freedom or accomplish that freedom, then I could be more concrete, more tangible. And so how ironic is it that in a sense it's maybe it makes sense ultimately. Freedom is not something you can hold. It's not something you can physically have. So to finally, have freedom, pursue freedom, fix freedom means also needing something that can't be physically held or stopped, and that's Bitcoin. That Bitcoin is the tool for freedom. So it's not necessarily like, oh, I just can't stop talking about Bitcoin. It's, oh, I'm just so excited about freedom, and finally through Bitcoin do we have a tool to achieve that freedom. I really have something I can talk about for hours on end to hit that goal of freedom.
Yeah, exactly right. I think that's very well articulated. And have you by any chance read the Sovereign Individual by James Davidson?
Has Guy Swan read it on his Bitcoin Audible podcast? That would be the
Yeah, I
way.
think so. Yeah, I
Okay.
think so.
So maybe
I
I've
don't know if
heard
he
parts
did
of
because I
it.
honestly haven't. I actually only recently found Guy Swan, so I still have a lot of catching up to do on him. But I don't know if he has. I think he has because I know it's a really popular Bitcoiner book. And what's interesting is that it was actually written before Bitcoin was invented, and yeah, I think you might like it if you haven't gotten a chance to look at it, because I think it talks a lot about self-sovereignty. And I think Bitcoin is that. And I never thought of self-sovereignty until I found Bitcoin. And I think that's the beautiful thing about it. It's exactly how you said it about freedom, how like, it's hard to define like what is freedom because we just think that we are free because we're thinking that we're living freely, especially like in America, like it's the freest country in the world, thank God. But at the same time, like there's still a lot that's being taken from us of that freedom. And so, um, like I never could quite understand like what it meant to say something like, for example, taxation is robbery and inflation is theft. So I never really understood that and until I started learning more and like it's going to be interesting to see how all this will play out and how this centralization will decentralize. So really looking forward to it. But thank you so much, man. Really appreciate having this conversation with you. I could literally keep going for hours with you.
Yeah, do you want a last word? Is
But
there
yeah.
anything that you didn't get a chance to say that you want to say before we go?
There's a ton. Yeah, I think for
It never
example,
ends. It never
yeah.
ends.
For example, I definitely recommend anyone listening to go check out this short video on YouTube. Just type in everything divided by 21 million by Ione Appleberg. I think you kind of have to watch that a couple times sometimes, or maybe even a few times. I've watched it more than a few times by now. It's just so interesting because it really does a good explanation of like how an economy works, and I think they do a really good job with that video. So I recommend that one. And then definitely so many great Bitcoin books. And actually, I'll just say this real quick. Just today, like I actually I came up with an interesting idea that I haven't seen being play out, like starting a Bitcoin book club where we read a Bitcoin book and then we discuss it bi-weekly. So I'm thinking of starting that up. So I would love to have your help with that because it sounds like um, you're very well read, and I think it would be nice to also read your book and share that. So yeah, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate you.
Awesome. Hey, Satoshi, I will take a chance if you want to suggest the book again. That you suggested it, not me, a book club, and my book will just happen to be one of them. And hey, maybe you'll be publishing a book one day. More likely a
Yeah, I would love
soundtrack, or
to.
more likely a
Yeah.
DJ soundtrack.
I really wanna, yeah, that's actually another project of mine that I really want to do is I really want to like put out a lot more Bitcoin specific songs and music with Bitcoin specific music. And I actually have been finding more and more Bitcoin specific artists. And I actually posted a new one that I found, JDEZ, JDez. He's got a really great Bitcoin song. So I highly recommend him. And there's also Zhao Tong, ZHOU space TONGED. if you look him up on YouTube, you can find a lot of interesting Bitcoin songs there as well. But yeah, Will, we could do this forever. Thank you so much. Thank you to the audience for listening, and I wish your podcast a lot of success. And I would love to have you on the Bitcoin is Freedom show as a special guest interview one week. So hope everybody tunes in to Bitcoin Twitter and hangs out with us. And if there's anything that we can do to help you guys learn about Bitcoin, that's what we're here for. I think we would love to help you on your journey. And just remember, guys, it's not a sprint. It's not, it's a marathon. So just the same way that it takes time to learn how to drive and to learn how to use technology and all that, like there's that learning for Bitcoin as well, but it's well worth it.
There you go. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's so early. Thank you, DJ.
Thanks so much.